my first encounter with Bernhard's literature came the morning after a dreadful, dreadful party in a warehouse in London filled with the sort of sogenannte artists that one finds in the creative world over there. And I was horrified by them, and it was disgusting. And I said, look at them, sitting there in their wrongness, being wrong. And a wonderful German journalist happened to be there that night, and the next morning gave me a copy of Holzfallen. And I read it, and it terrified me, because it said everything that I had ever wanted to say, so much better than I ever could. And that's how the obsession started. Since then, I've been at the Berliner Ensemble near constantly listening to Hermann Bayer's readings and so on and so on, but that was the first time.
And why are you so fascinated by Thomas Bernhard?
Well, I suppose there are a number of reasons. I suppose the real question you're asking, and this applies to Roger too, is why are a bunch of guys from England coming across here telling you about Thomas Bernhard? And the answer has many aspects. In my case, I suppose, it's because I grew up in Cape Town, South Africa, and my parents were heavily involved in the anti-apartheid struggle, and that ended when I was 10 years old, and the ANC came into power, and we became a democracy. But the people living around me were the same monstrous, vile, backward, disgusting, bigoted racists as had always lived around me. And the same relationship that I have to South Africa to this day, which is one where I'm simultaneously, I consider it a part of myself that I cannot and would not ever separate, but at the same time I'm horrified by it in every aspect, is something that I relate to very closely with Bernhard's idea of Austria. The second part of it is, of course, the work itself, where I feel that he, more than anybody, answers the question of how on earth do we take so many beautiful works in art, particularly in music actually, written over so many centuries, which are perfect and melodic and say nothing about the world that we live in today. And what Bernhard's work does is it attempts to deal with the fact that we no longer live in a world where from cradle to grave, life is a series of predictable events, which one can predict and which flow in their due course. There isn't a flow anymore. These days, for example, at any given moment, we will be bombarded by Google, by Facebook, by email, by 24-hour rolling news. And the sense that we have is just that we're drawn from one thing to another, and our ability to focus on any one narrative is gone. And instead what we have is fixations. We get completely obsessed about something and vexed about it. And long before we've had the capacity to get over that thing, something else simply takes us and forces us along. And this is what we've attempted to create in the Bernhard Suite. The third, and I suppose the most obvious answer, is simply that Bernhard's writing, even in translation, and I know there's a difference, and I know how great the difference is the most beautiful and melodic thing that one will ever read. And it comes as close as words ever will to approximating the state of music.
Adam, I take your word. What we wanted to create, we have one piece and we have two composers. How did the cooperation work between you and Roger?
Well, both wonderfully and awfully, I suppose, as all collaborations will. No, more seriously, Roger is the single best melodic writer that anybody will ever have the opportunity to work with, and that's a simple fact. And the result of this has been that with a piece like the Bernhard Suite, what we wanted to create was something where harmony and melody struggles to come out, where its natural state isn't there. It's something that has to force its way out. And Roger wrote a series of melodies and pieces and sent them across to me, and our collaboration occurred in the most case via email and Dropbox. And then I tortured his pieces and added a series of sections of my own, and one way or another we came to an end point where his melodies are pushing, are fighting to be heard, and ultimately, in a certain fashion, get their wish. But I think one of the things that's most interesting about the collaboration is that both of us have a faith that each of us can do things that the other can't do, and that therefore a piece isn't simply some great outpouring of emotion, A piece is a thing that's outside over there, and it's a thing that's created, and whatever way that it's created doesn't really matter so long as it reaches the form that it needs to reach. And certainly working with Roger, I have a great feeling that I've been able to do this. I certainly, to put it bluntly, would not have been able to have written this piece on my own.